Hi, I'm Dan Kline, Editorial Director for It'sRelevant.com, and I'm sitting here with Chris Meek, Republican candidate for Congress in the 4th District. Chris, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing well. Now, let me ask, you've been very involved in the community, nonprofits, a figure in town. Why run for office now?
It's very simple. Too many people are still out of jobs, too many people are still losing their home to foreclosure, and the government's still spending way too much money. And so something needs to be done to fix those problems right now.
What do you do?
What do I do?
And answer it in a sentence and we'll go home, because all of politics will be fixed.
Well, I've been in the financial services industry for 19 years.
No, I'm sorry. I mean, what do you do to fix the jobs problem, the education problem?
Okay.
Solve all the problems as fast as you can, and we'll just turn the camera off.
Okay. Well, first and foremost, the government is just putting more and more regulation on all types of industries, all corporations. And the lack of leadership we have in Washington right now is really giving these companies pause to think, why do we want to spend money to hire new people? Why do we want to build a new brick and mortar facility? Why do we want to do any more research and development? Because we don't know what's going to happen. Whether it's going to be an increase in healthcare costs, whether it's going to be higher corporate tax rates, people don't know right now. And so you really need to strip back the regulation and let the private sector do what it's done best for this nation's 235-year history.
How do you lower the cost of doing business here in Stamford?
We really need to have different tax breaks from both an individual and a corporate perspective. You need to incentivize the companies to get back out there to hire the people. And so by lowering the tax rates and broadening the base, I really think it's going to help spur the economy here in Stamford.
Now, there's definitely disagreement between Democrats and Republicans on sort of the role of Congress and government in general. What do you see Congress as being responsible for?
I think Congress and government in general is supposed to create an environment that is business friendly and lets, again, the private sector go out and do what it's done throughout our history and be entrepreneurs, be sole proprietors, do what we've done, do what we know, and allow us to sell our goods and services to somebody, and then they pass it on and somebody else buys it. Well, now we're selling more things. We need to hire somebody to help us sell those things in order to make those things. And so it all just becomes a cycle that just keeps building, and it's worked for 200 years.
Do you think the tax code is part of the problem?
Absolutely. It's outdated, it needs to be streamlined, it's very confusing. I think it's something like 14,000 pages. So it's pretty substantial.
I read it to prepare for this.
Not as many notes there. And so it definitely needs to be modernized and streamlined for today's economy.
Now, your kids go to school here in Stamford. Where do you see education reform? I mean, I don't know if you saw it, but we got the report cards, and Stamford schools have a ways to go in terms of the achievement gap.
Sure.
How do you see us fixing that, as a state and as a country in general?
I think one of the first things we need to realize on a local or national level is really we need to have parent involvement or adult involvement, because you need to have a vested interest in what our children are learning. And so being active in their education, being involved with it, and helping them along the way is a big part of it. Another big piece of the achievement gap is not focusing so much on maybe middle school reform, which I know our former superintendent here in Stamford was looking at, but really looking at pre-K and getting those kids started that much earlier and helping prepare them for kindergarten. I know that, for example, at the elementary school where my kids go to, we have a new principal up there, and she really stripped apart all the different test scores there and focused on where those gaps were. And we just had parent-teacher reviews last week, and my youngest daughter is in kindergarten, and her teacher specifically said, we're focusing on these 3 or 4 things because we have been deficient in there as a school or as a school system, and so we're moving that along. And so I think more involvement, obviously after-school programs are a big thing, keeping kids active, keeping them involved. There's a lot of places to grow for our education system, but I think it's where we really start.
Did you and your wife have to think about whether to put your kids in public schools?
No, we're both products of public schools, and there was no other decision for us.
Are there lessons we've learned here in Stamford that you think you can take nationally?
Absolutely. I think first and foremost, one of the biggest things has really been, if there's an issue, if we have a solution to the issue, working together towards that common goal, we can achieve anything. We've seen it across the board on various problems that we've had, and I think when people put aside whatever political background, religious, any demographic differences people have, when you come together and focus on what's right for Stamford, what's right for Connecticut, what's right for the country, that's where things get done.
How do you cut through the whole, right now Congress is very, very polarized. It's Democrats here, Republicans there, and sort of never the two shall meet.
Sure.
there's a part of me that thinks, well, that's kind of good because then nothing happens, which is usually better than what does happen.
Unfortunately, most people think that right
But
now.
how do you cut through that to make real change happen?
I think right now we need a new group of leadership from the top down who are more focused on the issues our country is facing and doing what's right for our country as opposed to what's right for my next re-election cycle 18 months from now. And I think that's why we're so polarized, because everyone is really focusing on 2012, obviously the presidential election year, and so everyone's got their eyes on that. And to your point, nothing will probably get done over the next year because of that. And so what we need to do is get a new batch of leadership in there who doesn't want to be the next 20-year career politician, who's willing to make the hard decisions right now that our country needs to make because everyone else is afraid to make those decisions. That's one of the reasons why I'm going there is I don't want to do it for 20 years. I think you become part of the problem, not the solution, when you're there that long. And there may be some political hits along the way for me doing what may not be right by Republicans or by Democrats or by some group or party, but by doing what's right for Connecticut, for Stamford, for America, that's what I'm going to be focused on.
Now, you mentioned the 2012 election. Who do you see coming out of the, with this crop of people running, do you see a Republican candidate unseating what has to be considered a very vulnerable president?
President Obama is very vulnerable, and I think the biggest deciding factor is going to be the economy. We all know that a year in a political life is forever, so a lot of things can happen over the next 10, 11, 12 months going into next year's election. I do think a Republican can absolutely beat him, and it will be based on the economy.
Do you support anyone in particular?
I think we have several good candidates that could come out of the field, and so it'll be interesting to see what happens over the next couple of months.
Great. Chris, thank you for having us. Good luck.
Thanks very much for having me.